I want to start off by saying hospice is not always a physical place. Although we do have we hope to have a 4-bed hospice residence in sometime in the next few years. But it's more a philosophy of care, as I'm hoping you're getting the picture this evening. It's a philosophy of care, and one of the ways of looking at this is to look at the ethics of caring versus medicalized dying. And I'm just going to read a couple of points here for you. The ethics of caring requires a societal shift in paradigms that, one, promote healthy living in advanced illness, promotes understanding of loss and grief, normalizes dying and the tasks of dying, accepts dying as a normal social phenomenon, okay? And it empowers patient voices and stories. And so we're hoping in the Hospice Society, we're trying to promote and facilitate all of that happening for people. And yeah, that's about it. So what do we do? Okay, I think I'll start by saying we train the volunteers, and we've actually done 2 trainings since November of 2016. So that's been a total of 45 people. So there were 15 on Texada Island last winter, or last fall, and about 25 people the fall before that in November. So currently, we have 6 people who are ready to go on Texada Island as volunteers, and over 20 people here on the mainland part of Powell River that are active volunteers. So they go through quite an extensive process. They have to do a criminal records check. They have to have an interview with me. They also complete 28 hours of training, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the details of that. And like I said, an interview and the training, and then they're ready to go. And they're out there. The training involves addressing the specific needs of dying persons and their families, and also the needs of the bereaved. And we spent probably, of that 28 hours, there's a good 16 hours that are just spent on communication skills. Just learning how to ask those open questions, learning how to be okay with silence, and learning about what their role is. And it's specifically around the psychosocial and spiritual needs of people. So volunteers, when they're trained and they're ready to go, they'll go into a person's home, and they get to know that individual and their family, and they're with them through their whole journey. It's one person through their whole journey of dying and bereavement and grief after that. So we also have 4 women right now that are assigned to MSP, and they have more or less regular shifts, and they go out for an hour or 2 on their shift. And they're available not just for the patients and the families, but for you. I know Jody, when you were talking about caregiver stress and burnout, the volunteers are there to hear you talk too. If you need to debrief with a volunteer and there's one there, seek them out, find a quiet place to talk for a couple minutes, and they're trained to be excellent listeners. And they don't fix stuff, they just listen well. So they're there for you too. Okay? And that is basically, in terms of what they do, it's subtle, but it's one of those things that there isn't time for you guys to address. You just have too many things to do. But the volunteer often hears the subtler needs, the quieter needs. There's a place where there's a trust and a relationship built, and will talk to the dying person and their family, and often the family or the person will, kind of disclose what they're worried about more, or have an opportunity to have those deeper conversations about their fears or their concerns or their joys and their happiness. And so the volunteers get to know them really well, and it can be as simple as sitting and reading a book for someone, or if they get to know what their hobbies are, then they can, they might bring something in from the outside, so they bring the outside world into the person who's, maybe bedridden at that point in their journey. So there's as many stories as there are individuals, I could tell you for sure. The process is that we get referrals from you folks, but anyone can make a referral to the Hospice Society. including a family member, a patient, or a friend. Anybody can do it. One thing I want to just point out to you, that even if a person is in a coma, if they're alone, our hospice volunteers will go and sit with that person. Just because they're not responsive doesn't mean that they couldn't use someone to hold their hand, right? So please do, when those MSP volunteers show up, you know, if there's someone in any room, even if they're alone and non-responsive, you know, send the volunteer in to sit with them, and they're happy to do that. The volunteers will often hear life stories, so that life review can be part of what they do, you know, when they're talking to their patients over a period of time. If they have, I guess the longest period of volunteering, like one person with one client, was 9 months before the person died, and they got quite close because she saw that client weekly, and they really knew each other very well. They were both artists, and they could connect on that level. So what else can I tell you? One thing that you need to know is, before I assign a volunteer, as soon as that referral comes in, I contact the client or the client's family member, the caregiver, and I make an arrangement to go and visit that person first. So I go and I get the lay of the land, you know, and I meet people and talk to them about what they can expect from a volunteer and what volunteers don't do. Like, they don't do any medical care, personal care, they don't feed people. There's certain things that they don't do from a liability perspective. So I tell them what they can expect and cannot expect. And then I go back to my office, which happens to be my office at home right now. It's my studio upstairs. And I look through my list of volunteers, and I try to be a matchmaker. I try to find a good match for that person, in as much as I have the resources for them, right? And then I, you know, contact that volunteer, give them the information, and call the client back and let them know the volunteer will be calling them and when they can expect to see that person. One of the things that I'm quite aware of, when a person's been discharged from MSP and they've gone back, you know, their home, and they're starting to get a lot of people visiting. You know, the home care nurse is coming, they're getting maybe home support workers set up, the OT person is visiting. There's a lot of activity in that first week or two when they come home, and that's not necessarily the time that I'll show up. I'll wait until some of that busyness has settled down, because they're pretty tired. It's pretty unsettling to have all those strangers in your home. So I'll come after that, and when things have settled down. So I do an assessment of myself, and then I match the volunteer. I don't send them in cold. I also want to know that it's safe for them, right? I want to know that they're safe, and I want to know things like, are there pets in the house, or are they heavy smokers, and things like that, right, for my volunteers. Okay.
Can I do a quick question? If you have someone in the community that is matched with a hospice care worker, and then that person is admitted to hospital, are they followed by the same person?
Yes, they are. Okay. Yeah, we encourage the volunteer to, they're like their volunteer to the end, right? For sure. But we still have the general volunteers on MSP, for sure. We also have, just as a matter of note for you, we also have a volunteer assigned to every house in Willington Creek Village. So they have their own volunteer. That way, even though a large number of the people have some degree of dementia, you know, the residents there, they see the same volunteer face week to week. So if that person then becomes quite near to the end of their lives, it's not a stranger parachuting in to sit beside the bed. At least it's someone they've seen around in their house for a while. So we do have volunteers there as well. And I'd like to grow that program. Just to give you a little bit of some of the statistics of what we've done. I'll tell you, we had in 2016 we had 52 palliative referrals. That's like a quarter, or slightly more than a quarter, of the people who died at Powell River in our first year of operation. 52 referrals, okay, and 22 bereavement referrals. We've run 2 adult grief support groups, one here in this community and one out in, is still ongoing in Claman, out there with people that are in that community. Sources of our referrals, we had, by and large, it was from physicians. There were 14 of those 52 came from from doctors, 1 from the OT, 9 from acute care, 8 from home care, 3 from the social worker when you had one, you know, Kathy Northrup was here, 1 from the nurse practitioner, and before we got the volunteer visiting program up at Willingdon Creek Village, we had 6 referrals from them in 1 year, and 7 family members referred by themselves. They were self-referred. And as of the end of December 2016, we provided the community with more than 500 hours of volunteer service. And that's our first year of operations. So we've really, really been active, right, doing that. One of the things I do want to mention about the referral forms, just recently, I'm trying to make sure that I give some feedback. So I'm trying to get information back to the doctors or to other referring sources about whether there's been a match, you know, for the, so that it's not like it just, the referral just disappears, you know, into space and you never know what happens. So we're trying to give some feedback that way. It really helps if you make sure your name is legible on the referral form, because sometimes it's like, well, I know it came from MSP because there's a little ticky box for that, but it's like, who? You know, so be legible. I have never heard a bad story. I mean, I've always heard positive things coming off of the 4th floor about the care, you know, from both patients and from their family members, just saying nurses, the nursing staff, everybody was wonderful on the 4th floor. So really, you know, when you think about the bag of stuff you have to carry around every day, it really speaks very well to your professionalism and just to the heart that you bring to your work. So I thank you. And yeah, then it's the same in the home. You know, they appreciate and they have a trust relationship with their home care nurse, right? And I know everybody works really hard to make sure that things happen in a timely and effective way for people. So.